Okay, I think we're up and running. So, fair bits happened since the last stream. I finished off a couple of additional idle animations for the spider crab, and I dropped the model into a Unity project to see if I could hook it up with some basic animator movements and such. This is what the crab looks like in Unity. So what I've done here is I've just applied the material to this crab. If I show you the main body of the crab, he's got a skin mesh renderer that comes in automatically when you drop it into Unity. I've created I've taken the material, the crab color material, added the albedo map and the normal map to the model to give it the requisite colors and textures and such. So he's looking good, exactly as intended. So that's all great. What I've done as well is I've just prepared the animations in using the Unity importer here as well. So when you so what I did was I exported an FBX, and I'll actually show you that shortly, but you end up with all of your clips created here in Unity. They automatically come in. They come in if you use it with an FBX export rather than just a blend file. You end up with them all saying armature, pipe, such and such. All I've done is I've just gone through and I've removed all those, but you can see they're all hooked up to the armature. These are all the clips that come in the FBX file, and then I've just mapped them to the relevant clips that Unity uses. And you can see if you plus out the root FBX object, you get all of the different animation clips here that you can use. And in fact, you can if I click on the root of the spider crab, you can actually play some of these, for example. So if I pull this up a little, expand it out, you can play the clip, and this little window here just shows you what that will look like, and it will loop through and everything else. And I've also got the feeding animation that I was working on at the end of the last stream, etc., etc. So that all worked fine when I pulled that in. And then what I did was I set up an animator on the spider crab. So it automatically gets an animator component added, which is this bit here, but it doesn't have an animator controller in the slot there. So what you do is you create an animator controller, and that's what I've done here. So I've created this animator controller, and I'll just show you that. I'll pull it up here just so you can see a bit clearer. And I was talking in the previous stream about having different layers of animations that you can sort of add on top of each other, and this is what I've done here. So what I have is I've got my base layer with my idle animation and my idle feeding animation, and those will just transition. I've set these up with some triggers. So I've got this trigger called feeding. It's actually a boolean, boolean called feeding, and it will, when it's false, the clip should be in idle, and when it's true, it should transition to the feeding animation. So you've got the two animations, and they'll flip backwards and forwards based on a script that I wrote to just randomly sample a time, and then it will randomly transition between those two. I've then got a completely separate eye stalk layer. So this is just for the two little eye stalks, and that just runs on its own. That's the idle animation for the eye stalks. And you see this little M up here. The reason that's got an M there is because I'm using an avatar mask, and I've called this, it actually doesn't show it here, there we go, spider crab eye stalk mask. And what this does is it allows me to override, so you've got the weight here, so I've completely overridden the eye stalk, any eye stalk animation that was on the base layer, of which there was none because I deliberately didn't put any on there. That will all get overridden by this eye stalk idle clip based on the spider crab eye stalk avatar mask. So what an avatar mask is, if I click on this, you can see you can pull in the avatar, which is in the FBX file here, the spider crab avatar, and that shows all the bones that I've set up in the rig. And I've just selected literally the two eye stalk bones. and that's it. So basically anything in this layer will only animate these bones. So what that means is when this is running and transitioning between the two, the eye stalk will always be waving around. I've done exactly the same thing for the mandibles and the left claw and the right claw. Actually, these I'm probably not going to need for various reasons, which I'll explain later. But the mandibles also has an override mask, spider crab mandibles mask. And again, this is exactly the same situation, except I've overridden the two mandibles, the 2 bones in each of the mandibles, so 4 bones in total. And that's that one. And all that happens here is there is an empty state, which means the mandibles just stay, where they are in the base model. And then I've got a trigger, which is chew, and when chew gets triggered by the script, the mandibles chewing animation will happen, and the mandibles will do their thing independent of what's happening in the other 2 layers. And again, this is just a completely overridden layer. So that will work. That works quite nicely as well, and I'll show you that shortly in action. The last thing I did to set this up was for the idle feeding animation, which is the one that we set up at the end of the last stream, with him just sort of alternating between the 2 feeding states. You can come down here and you can add events. Okay, so what I've done here is if I scrub through, how do I do this now? Yeah, here we go. You can see the little scrubber here as I drag the viewer across. When the right arm gets to this point, you can see this event here fires, and it's called chew. Simple as that. And again, exactly the same happens at the end of the animation when the left arm is at the mouth parts here, and is also called chew. And that basically fires that event. It looks for the event in the root object for any method in any of the scripts attached to the root where the animator is. And what I've done is I've created this spider crab controller script, which I'll show you briefly. There we go. Hang on, he's popped over to my other screen. Let me bring that up. Here we go. So it's a simple script. It just has the animator, a reference to the animator. It's got a boolean for feeding, which just determines how the transition between feeding and idling happens, and a couple of hash codes just to make the transitions a bit more efficient, and some idle times and feeding times between a random range. So what happens is I grab all the various references that I need, and then I start a coroutine. You can see here I've actually spelt this wrong. I always seem to do this. Let me just refactor that while I'm here. Idle feeding transition. So what happens there is we set the feeding to false, the feeding trigger or the feeding boolean on the animator, and just keeps looping through this. This is a coroutine, hence the start coroutine method here. And while it's running, we grab a random range between the min and the max for the idle time. We wait for that amount of time by doing yield return wait for seconds for the idle time. We then set the bool to the feeding bool to true. We then wait another random time between the min and max for the feeding, and we wait for that duration. And while that's going on, the crab will be doing its feeding animation. And then again, we set the boolean for the feeding back to false, and it will transition back to the idle state and return one frame, and then go back to the start again and keep going through this. And there we go. And this method chew is what is called by the feeding animation. So when the claws reach the mouth in either direction, that event gets fired. It finds this event, this method here, and it just sets the chew trigger on the in the animator here. What's it doing? I think it's just compiling. I suspect my laptop's going to struggle with streaming and running Unity at the same time. So yeah, here are the 2 parameters: the chew trigger and the feeding boolean. And so when that script fires the chew trigger, come on. Always really struggling today. Yeah. Okay. So when the chew trigger gets fired, this condition becomes active, and the transition happens to the mandibles chewing. And then once the mandibles have finished their animation, we have an exit time here, and it just exits back to the mandibles being at rest. So there you go. So with all that, the upshot is that we end up with, let's pull this down here, we end up with, in fact I'll just leave that like that, and I will select the spider crab. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to demonstrate that, play the scene, and what happens is, with any luck, hopefully this will work. There we go. So you can see in the base layer, the crab is in idle, and at some random time after, down here it's 18.6 seconds. Okay, so it will, after 18 seconds, it will transition to the feeding animation. It should happen any second now. There we go. You're starting the feeding animation now. I could do with a transition between these as with an extra animation clip. You can see that the eye stalks are always animating. I'll zoom in on those in a second. And the mandibles, you can see when the claw reaches the mouth, transitions to mandibles chewing, and it will chew for a bit and then go back to empty. And you can see he's gone back to the idle animation now as well. So let's zoom in a little bit on the claws, on the mouth parts. There we go. There we go. So you can see his eye stalks are always animating, doing their thing, and the mandibles will chew whenever the claws reach the mouth, because that's triggered as part of the animation clip for the feeding. So there we go. So that was the idea, and everything was working reasonably well. However, I came across a problem when I realised that my original plan was to use the IK system in Unity to control the claws when a player walks past, for example, and I want the claws to lash out and attack the player. Okay. However, I had failed to realise that the system that Unity uses to override the IK systems from 3D models only works with humanoid rigs, basically. So this is clearly not a humanoid rig, as you may have spotted. And when you import a model into Unity, you see this rig tab here in the import settings. And you have an animation type here, humanoid or generic. We can ignore these other two. Generic is basically any rig, doesn't really matter what it is. Humanoid is clearly for humanoid characters with 2 arms, 2 legs, feet, and all that other stuff. And head, etc. And there are certain rules that you need to adhere to for a rig to be considered humanoid. So you've got the relevant bones in the arms, down the torso, down the legs, and you've got IK. You can have IK bones for the legs and also the arms if you want to. Not necessarily required for the arms, but for the legs it's always a good idea. And there's a callback system in Unity which allows you to override any humanoid IK movements and do them yourself through code. So what I was thinking was that the IK bones that I'd set up for my claws here, I would be able to take these claws are IK, right? So the IK bones at the end of each claw, and I'd be able to basically drive those through script. However, the callback doesn't work with generic rigs. So I realised that I wasn't going to be able to do what I wanted to do. That was a problem, and it meant that all that effort to build the IK rig and everything else may have been for nothing. However, a friend of mine pointed out a very good tutorial, which let's see if I can find it. I think I took a reference to it. Here we go. Yeah. So here's the tutorial by Alan Zucconi. It's an introduction to procedural animations, and this was very close to what I wanted to achieve with my crab. So you can see here what he's got is a robot arm which is following a target, and this is all done through script without a need for IK callbacks or whatever from Unity. You just build it all yourself, basically from scratch. So there's a bunch of parts to this tutorial, including the implementation. It's missing a few bits. If you can download the whole project if you're a Patreon supporter of Alan Zucconi, but I basically implemented it myself, and I discovered there were a few problems with it that meant that I needed to make some adjustments to the code. But having done that, I created my version of Alan Zucconi's inverse kinematics system, and this is, well, I'll briefly show you very quickly here. This is what it looks like. I'm not going to go into the details, but the basic idea is that you do your own inverse kinematics calculations. So you're effectively making small variations of each joint in whichever arm you want to manipulate. You add joints down. You add robot joints. This little script here onto each of the components down the arm, and then there's a calculation that looks at the forward kinematics, i.e., if you move the joint through certain small angles, do you get closer or further away to the target? And if you get closer to the target, you move in that direction, etc., etc. So having spent an entire day on Sunday trying to get this to work, I eventually semi succeeded. So here is my version of the crab with these joints attached to the left arm here, and I'll show you what happens when we launch this version. Here we go. So there are no animations running on this crab. Instead, what's happening is the script is trying to drive the end of the claw. There's a target on the end of the claw, or a joint on the end of the claw, which is trying to reach this ball here. Now there are various reasons why it doesn't quite reach it, and I'll explain those in a minute. But within certain limited range of movements, the crab is able to reach for the target, and it's doing all this through the script, and it's calculating it itself. However, there is a slight problem in that because of the rig that I set up with my crab, the movement of the joints is insufficiently dexterous to allow it to, for example, if I try and move the target to the mouth, you can see you can't quite reach it. And in fact, the arm gets all sorts of bent out of shape, and it looks very weird. So I realised that I would have to make some changes to the bones in my crab's arm here, so that it could properly reach the ball at the mouth, and also, let's say, for example, if we want him to be feeding on the ground here, you can see his arms are all twisted and bent now, and then they're not going to quite reach it because he's become a bit twisted. So there's various issues that I need to sort out for that. So after all of that, which has taken me 20 minutes to explain, I realised that I had to start again. Not quite start again, but I needed to go back into Blender. Let's turn that one off and turn him back on for the time being. So what I needed to do was go back into Blender and make a few changes. So what I did was I duplicated the crab, or rather I saved it as Spider Crab for procedural animation. So this is the I've taken a fresh copy of the base model. I made some changes to the arms at the front here. So I've added 2 additional bones. Okay, so these bones were not present in the original model. So what we've got here is it just allows me to have a few extra degrees of freedom, which with luck, hopefully, I haven't tested this yet, and that's the point of this stream, will allow the movement of the arm to give it a bit more range of motion, and we'll be able to reach a wider area of targets. So that's what I've done there, and I had to redo the weight painting for the arms and everything else, but that's all done. I did that offline because I thought that was probably a bit tedious for everyone to see. So what I'm going to do now, very quickly, I say very quickly, hopefully quickly, is slightly adjust some of the animations that I built last time. I'm going to leave the mandibles and I'm going to leave the eye stalks, but I'm going to, so you can see actually idle feeding. Yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save very quickly and then reopen. And what I should find is those have gone away. Yep, there we go. So idle feeding, I don't think I can use this anymore, but I'm going to leave it there because I don't think it's going to do any harm. Let's see what happens. Actually, is it actually going to work? Yeah. See, I think part of the problem is that it's not going to work because I've changed the rig a bit. So is this going to work? Let's see. Yeah, I'm a bit worried that I've broken all of the animations. Yeah, I have a feeling that all of these are broken now. That's annoying. I wonder if that's the case. Ah, maybe it has to be in pose mode. That might be it. Let's see. Okay, yeah, you have to be in pose mode. That's fine. That's not my mistake. Just my. Yeah. Okay. So this is the problem here. Now the interesting. Is that because I've got I may have slightly messed up the weight painting here. Yeah, it looks like I've messed up the weight painting. So what I'm going to do is let's put that there and go back to default layout. Yeah, looks like I've messed up the weight painting, so that's fine. I'm going to just quickly sort that out, I think. Aha. So what have we got here? Something's happened. It is very odd. Right, I think what I'm going to do is go back to pose mode. I'm going to just set this back up. Alright, I'm a little bit confused. What's going on here? This is not the same. I think what's happened is I've got some weird issue here. There we go. Let's get rid of these. I know what the problem is. The problem is that I'm in object mode. That's the problem. Right, now what I need to do oh, I'm making a right mess of this. That's what I wanted to do. Idle, there we go. Right, fine, good. So let's set him up back in his sort of standard pose and go back to the default. And I'm just going to take my jumper off because I'm getting warm. Right, there we go. So what is going wrong with this then? Ah, now here, that's the problem, isn't it? You know what? This isn't quite what I want. It'll be fine. This will be fine. So it's this ring around here. It's not quite given me all of the. Let's just grab all of those and assign 50% to that. I think that's better. I think I must have made a mistake when I was applying the weights for the arm there. There we go, that's fine. So let's very quickly grab this and see. Yeah, I think that's going to be fine. Cool. Right. Let's go back to animation. Idle feeding. Let's see if this is working better now. This is not the idle feeding animation. This is the idle animation. So what is idle feeding doing then? Okay, I appear to have lost my original. Is it that one? You know what, it doesn't matter because I wasn't going to use it anyway. So perhaps what I should do is I'm just going to delete the idle feeding animation from there. Let's get rid of that as well, because that's going to. Oh, what am I doing here? Can't seem to get rid of this. There we go. Let's get rid of that as well. Okay. Dope sheet. Right, idle feeding, that's going to disappear. So if you save and then open recent, that should get rid of that. Yep, it's gone. Right, so the idle feeding. Perhaps this is okay, great. We appear to have everything back again. and then idle should just be waving around. Okay, so I'm going to leave the idle feeding after all that messing about. I'm going to leave the idle feeding as it is. I have a feeling, because I changed the way the roll angles of all these things worked, so I might have to redo the claws as well. For example, I think these are going to be all messed up now. Yeah, you can see. You can see these are all skew-whiff now because I changed the roll angles of all these, but I'm not going to worry about that. I'll sort those out later. The main one I just want to make sure that my idle animation is not going to get messed up when I try and animate the claws individually using script. So I'm quite happy with him sort of waving around like that. That's fine. However, what I want to do is remove any of the curves associated with the claws. These two here. So what I'm going to do is select all, deselect those. Can I just delete these? I don't know, actually. It's a good question. Tell you what I'll do. I'll just box select those. I'm going to get rid of the keyframes. So those should stay exactly where they are now. Yep. And I'm going to call this idle body idle. There we go. So now I've got, just in case I ever need it, there we go. He's just moving around. The claws will stay exactly where they are. I think I can basically get rid of this one now because it's the same. Seems to be associated with a large number of things though, so let's go back to the NLA editor. Oh, it's not in there, okay. I worry that I've accidentally added some animation data to the model itself. Yeah, there we go. Clear animation data, don't need that. You've got to be really careful when adding animations that you don't end up accidentally adding them to the model rather than the armature. So what have we got? I think we're down to, let's just leave it at that. Right, so I think that's all we need to do. Yeah, that's fine. So what I'm going to do is select the body. Select everything, go up to File, Export as FBX. Now the reason I made sure I selected only those things was, and I didn't select like the lights and the other stuff that was hidden, is that I don't want to export the lights. So I want to click the selected objects. I want to go into the project, so let me find the right project. Assets, models, SpiderCrab. Right, SpiderCrab FBX, SpiderCrab for procedural, so that's the original one. SpiderCrab for procedural animation FBX, export FBX. That will take a couple of seconds. Or quite a few seconds. It's usually a bit quicker than this. Right, okay, that's worked, I hope. Go back into Unity, and what we should see is it should pop up here, because this is the folder. There we go. So what we have is the new model with all of the clips have been brought in. So there's a couple of things to do. Firstly, I think this should all be fine. I think. The rig is generic. The root node, I'm just going to click armature root. Shouldn't need to worry about that. I'll just hit apply just because. The animations, I'm just going to change this one here, just so that, because this is going to be the only one I'm going to use really, and I'm going to do the eye stalks as well, and the mandibles actually. I'm not going to worry about the rest of them just yet. I'll just leave those as they are. Why is that? That's odd, it hasn't changed it up here for some reason. Let's not worry about that just yet. So the mandibles, they don't, that doesn't loop, but the eye stalks do, and the body does. So let's just have a quick look here. Yeah, he's moving around, doing his thing. Okay, that's fine. Let's click apply for that. Okay, it's changed these now, that's fine. So these are my primary ones. I'll worry about these other ones later. I might just tidy this up a little because this is getting a little bit complicated. So I'm going to create a new folder. Spider crab. So let's just type no IK. No procedural animation. Let's just grab all of that lot, stick that in there, and these ones as well. And that one. Not sure why it's not doing anything. Seems to have frozen. Okay, there we go. And another folder. Procedural animation. And I will put in the new one. And this is the only thing in there at the moment. Seems to be getting stuck for some reason. Doesn't make me fill me with confidence. Right, so with any luck, we've got the same material attached to both models. So if I have a look here, yeah, you should see he's got the right material attached. So what I need to do is basically make the equivalent stuff for the new model as I have done for this one, minus a few things. So let's just duplicate that. Get rid of that. I'm just going to say spider crab with IK. All right, so let's drop. I think I made some slight changes to the scale factor as well. Yeah, 0.5. Okay, so let me just do that real quick as well. 0.5 and apply that. Otherwise, he'll be enormous. I mean, he's pretty huge anyway, right? So let's see what he looks like. So let's just drop him in. There he is. So if I click play, he should literally just sit there doing nothing at all. When when it eventually decides to do something. Yep, there we go. Just sat there. So what I need to do is basically set him up with the animator. You can see there's no animator here. So I need to create an animator controller. So what I might do actually is just grab this one and copy it into here. Is it working? It's really struggling today. Let's just duplicate it. There we go, finally. Just so that we're completely explicit. Right, definitely got the right one. So I'm going to have to make a few changes here. Firstly, I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to leave those. However, what I do need to do is create new avatar masks. Avatar mask. I don't know whether this is strictly necessary. I could probably use the existing ones, but just in case. Import skeleton, body claws, blah blah blah, eye stalks, eye stalks. Don't need that. Okay. So that's so basically what I need to do is change this from all right, yeah, so I've just named them slightly differently. So let me be completely explicit. Okay, that's good. And the mandibles, I'm going to need to do something similar. Create an avatar mask. Spider crab, mandibles, mask for procedural animation. I'll be able to simplify all these. If this works, I'll get rid of the other one and just rename all these so they're a bit easier to see what's going on. Transform, grab the avatar, import the skeleton, deselect everything including the model, body, claws, don't want the claws, eye stalks, legs, mandibles, mandible, and mandible. Perfect, right. And so this one is now going to be mandibles mask for procedural animation. Great. So that's all the same. This I'm going to completely change. There's going to be no feeding animation. So in fact I can get rid of feeding. Delete. Chew is going to be triggered through a script, not through the animation system. So I'm going to leave that. That's fine as it is. However, this idle clip is no longer the correct idle clip that I want. I want actually the body idle clip from the new one. So that's that. The mandibles chewing is now the different mandibles chewing for the new model. Not that it matters, but you know, we may as well use the correct one. And the eye stalks idle again should be the eye stalks idle from the new model. Okay. So I'm just going to rename this as well, body idle, to match the name of the clip. Okay, with that done, I'm hoping, put that back down there, he should just be idling now, with the claws staying static, unlike the previous version. And you know why he's not doing that? Because I haven't given him the animator. So the animator controller is not in the correct slot. Must remember that. And in fact, while I'm here, let me just drag this down in here so I've created a prefab. So this is now a prefab that I can drop into other scenes. In your own time. Okay, he seems to be working. Let's just check that his eyes are doing the right thing. Yep. Waving his eyes around. Just being a spider crab. So, great, that's working. Got some WY's issues, but I'm not going to worry about that because I'm not adding any sound effects today. That's for somebody else's job. That's somebody else's job. Save the scene. While I'm here, I'm going to save the project because that makes sure that the prefabs get saved as well. So, with all that, I need to start setting up my IK system. So, in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the test rig there. The target, so that should now be, there we go, now I've got the target ball. Let's just move it in a bit closer. There we go, you should be able to reach that no problem. Now I need to find the relevant arms and such. So I'm going to do it with just the one arm to start with. And the pincer there. So I need to add one final object into the end of this chain to act as the the end point of the pincers where he's going to try and reach. So pincer ends. Let's just add a empty object there, and I'm going to drag this up to parent it to the main arm here. So it's now on the end of that arm, and I'm going to just drag it up there as well. And I'm going to call this left claw tip. In fact, let's stick with the naming conventions that I set up in the model. Claw tip L. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to just bring it down to the tip there, and I might even, in fact, that was a silly thing to do. The position's fine. What I want to do is just reset all of these rotations. So it's pointing annoyingly. What I want actually is for the blue line to be pointing in this direction. So let me just rotate that by 90 degrees. So it's minus 90 along the X. So that now we should have. So that's the Z direction basically of the pincer. Let's just move it slightly back. Whoops. What I might do is I might give this a little gizmo. There we go. Just so we can see. Alright, so basically this is going to attempt to reach the ball. That's the idea. So what we need to do is we need to add components onto each of these arms, basically. and that is a robot joint. So let's start at the bottom. The other thing we need to do is we need to add here a what script is this? Can't remember now. It's up here. Inverse kinematics controller. There we go. Inverse kinematics controller. The target is the ball. Show gizmos. Yes, I want to show the gizmos. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make a really quick change here. Gizmo radius. What should we make it? 0.2. Gizmo radius. All right. So this is just shows the gizmos. What will happen is this will jump to the end of the claw, and you should see the idea of that is so that I can see exactly, to make sure that the script is working sufficiently well that this gizmo should map to here if all of the code is working properly. So how many? So what I need to do now is try and figure out why this is freezing. Okay, cool. Right, so how many have we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I've got 6 bones, 6 joints that I need to assign here. So I need to have 6 there, and I'm going to just drag them in one at a time so that I don't mess this up. So what's going to happen here is the script, the inverse kinematics controller, will control each of these joints individually, such that the final one, the one that I've attached to the tip here, will attempt to reach the target. That's the idea here. So the sampling distance is how many degrees each time step each joint will try and rotate through in order to reach the target. The distance threshold, basically, it will try and get within that distance of the threshold of the target before it stops, and the learning rate is how much it moves. So okay, so the sampling distance is when it's doing the initial calculations to work out whether you need to go further, how to move the joints to get further away, to get closer to the target as opposed to further away from the target. So it will try each joint backwards and forwards by the sampling distance. From that it works out the gradient, i.e. the direction it needs to go in order to reduce the gap between the current distance and the next time step, the distance to the target in the next time step, and the learning rate is how much it actually moves in that time step when it performs the final animation. So you can find out all the details about that on Alan Zacconi's tutorial. So I won't labour the point. I'm just going to apply that so that it remembers everything, and I need to do a few things to set up each of these joints. Firstly, each axis, I need to work out what axis this joint should rotate through. So this one, I want it to basically rotate around like that, perhaps. So that's the y-axis. So I'm going to put 1 there. I don't need to worry about the start axis or the root joint. In fact, those shouldn't be shown in the inspector, so that's just a script thing that I need to change. I'm going to leave that as -360 to 360 to start with. That's just a limitation on the when I set up some limits on how much it can rotate. This one, I think what I want to do is to allow it to rotate around that direction, so around the Z axis, which is the blue one. This one, so let me see, so we've got, so it can rotate along the y-axis there, the z-axis there, yep, and then, so these, what I really want is all three of these, so this one then should be able to rotate around the x-axis, so up and down, right, cool. So that should give this little joint here, basically mimic all three axes, so that's cool. Then this one, I only want it to rotate, if I zoom in, I'll focus on that particular joint, you can see, you can imagine basically what I want it to be able to do is to rotate like this, which is along the z-axis, the blue one here, so that's, I need to put a 1 there, and same sort of deal here, except now that the joint is slightly different, it's actually poking along the x-axis, so I want it to rotate along the x-axis. Now you see what I've done here is I did a bit of readjustment of all of the roll angles for the various joints in the arm so that they should be a bit more aligned properly with the directions that I want this to bend, so that's definitely now correct and aligned along the x-axis. And the last one doesn't really matter because this isn't going to move, but let's just say Z, doesn't really matter. So with all that, let's apply those changes to the prefab. We should see all of these bold go non-bold. And shall we go for it? Let's try it, see what happens. This could go horribly wrong. Oh, he's trying. Sort of working, but he's not quite reaching it. Whoops. So you can see, yeah, the gizmos are indeed working properly, so that's great. That means the script is working as intended. So actually I'm just going to turn those gizmos off because I don't need to worry about that anymore. And let's try moving the target around and see. Right, so he's sort of, yeah, this is the bit I was worried about. So he's trying to move, but the problem is, I think what's happening is the animation is overriding it. The animation clip. So the next thing to do is to see if that's really the case. Turn that off. Is to turn off the animator. So let me. See, this is what could basically put a kibosh on the whole thing. So I've removed the animator, which means he's not going to do his idle animation anymore. So let's see if the IK system works without the animator present. Boom, straight away. No messing. Although that's a bit weird. He's getting there. So I've clearly still got issues with my my UVs, my weight painting, and he's not quite as responsive as I want him to be. But he is able to reach his mouth a bit more cleanly without such obvious weird motions. You know, his arms are actually bending in a semi-realistic way. Okay, that's interesting. So one quick thing to try to improve his responsiveness, I'm going to put this way up to 50, and let's just see what effect that has. And then I'll see if I can figure out what's going wrong with the mappings here. Whoa, okay. Yeah, there's some weird stuff going on. Yeah, he's a lot quicker. But it looks like I need to set some limits on the rotations of these various things. So he's much quicker at responding now. But he's got a slight issue in that some of the joints get a bit out of whack. Yeah, and you can see, look, his arm's bending way over here. So that, I think, is just going to be an issue of setting the limits on the joints. But in principle, that's sort of working reasonably well. Okay, right. There's some work to do there, but it's got some potential. So I'm just going to save that. Save the project just in case. Now, what is going on with these bones here? So I thought this was all fine. Oh, crikey, that's not what I wanted to do. Problem with moving backwards and forwards between Unity and Blender is that you get very confused with the different controls. Ah! Ha! Look at that. So this bone has got these associated with it. That's not right. How about this one? Have I done the same on this side? Don't think so. Okay. So yeah, I need to basically remove the anything from here. So let me just take all of those. And click remove. That's all right. Let's just double check everything else is, all these other bones are okay. I think so. That one looks all right. That one looks all right. That one looks all right. All right, okay, save that. Go to object mode, select everything. There we go. Save, export. Overwrite the original file, the FBX file. There we go, and back into Unity, it should re-import the file. Nothing should change here, hopefully. There we go. And when I try this now, that should have fixed the issues with those weird vertices. Yep, apart from the fact that he's getting himself into a tangle. Yeah, that's better, isn't it? There we go. Okie dokie. Right, so I think what I need to do is work out the limits for each of the rotations of these angles and apply those to the various robot joints here. For example, that one's probably all right. This one, so what axis am I doing here? Z. So what's that? That direction. So he's going to be rotating around like that. That's going to be moving like this. So really I don't want him to be able to move more than about there. So about let's say -5. And I don't really want him to be able to move more than, let's say, -90. Say 90. So -5 to 90. So let's see if that works. -5 to +90. This may end up a bit weird because sometimes Unity does some odd things with how it calculates these angles, but let's see how it goes. This one is rotating about the x-axis. So that's this one here. So he rotates up and down like that. So I don't really want him to go much above that, shall we say. Say 45 degrees, and not really anything below -45 degrees. So 45 to -45. -45 to 45. See if that works. And then this one. Whoops. It's going about the z-axis. So really I don't want it to go more than about -100. So -110 to -110 to -20. Let's try that. This one for some reason is on the x-axis. I don't really want it to go much more than 110 in the positive to about 20 to 110. 20 to 110. Right. Let's see what happens with that then. I may find that this is going to send it all sorts of wonky, but let's see what we get. Ooh, straight in there. No messing around. Although it's done some slightly odd things with this particular joint here. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to reduce the sensitivity of this down to about, let's say, 20 to start with. Okay, that was good. Slightly odd shape he's made with his arm there, but yeah, here's the problem. You can't quite reach the ground for some reason. He's struggling, you can't quite reach it. It appears he can't quite reach his mouth either. He's trying. Definitely some odd movements going on here. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do at all. Let's unwrap him and see if I can get him to get there. All right, I think I've got some fine tuning to do here. This is not working quite how I wanted it to. Ideally, I want these two joints to sort of work in tandem. Now, you see, I think this joint here is not quite behaving as I intended it to. Which one is that? Pause that a second. Ah, now. Interesting. Yeah, okay. So, got some problems which I'm going to try and work out offline. But I hope that was interesting to see a slightly different way of animating, or at least trying to animate a character using a procedural system. Hopefully before the next stream starts I will have done a bit of fine-tuning and things will be a bit smoother, but we shall see. This may be a dead end, but you never know. It's worth trying these things. Thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you in the next stream, which may be later today, hopefully. Until then, take it easy.